Good evening, everyone. So why don't we just dive in? So just to get started, I'm Ron Wright, and I am the chair of the Black and African American cohort for this task force that we're involved with. And I want to welcome everyone here this evening. If you don't know by now, this task force is specifically charged with trying to figure out how we reduce, if not eliminate, hate crimes, bias, and hate incidents, not only in MCPS, but in most other public and private spaces in Montgomery County. So just a quick definition, and I'm going to use the definition from the Office of Human Rights. What is a hate crime? In Montgomery County, Maryland, a hate crime is a criminal act motivated either in whole or substantial part by another person or group's race, color, national origin, religious belief, sexual orientation, gender identity, homelessness, or disability. Examples include vandalism, physical assault, arson, cross burning, bomb threats, intimidation, or threat. A hate incident is motivated by acts that do not rise to the level of hate crime that are personal in nature. Examples include offensive or hateful speech, bullying, disruption of by hateful flyers. So a lot of that you might see in our MCPS schools. Our mandate is to, again, help the county and all stakeholders to eliminate and reduce these incidents, and also to produce a report that would include some recommendations and our solutions of how we do that. We can't do that without the participation of our students. So we are very happy that our students are here, that MCPS has coordinated your participation, and also Ms. Tiffany Kelly, our co-chair, has done the same. We are. So let me finish, Tiffany, so we can get it. We're extremely happy to have Dr. McKnight with us here tonight. We know how busy you are and what a sacrifice you're making to be with us. We also want to extend profuse thanks to school board member Brenda Wolf, who actually initiated getting this meeting together. And then all of our other MCPS representatives. John, thank you so much for working with us to make this happen again. So I'm going to let Tiffany open the floor. And Tiffany, you go right ahead. Thank you, everyone, for being here.
What we would typically do here, thank you, Ron. What we typically do here is have some polls ready for our students. Unfortunately, we could not get that feature going. So from time to time, I will ask our students to please respond to something in the chat. Our co-chair, Ron, just read a really long description of what hate and bias can look like. How many of our students put in the chat, yes or no, understood the definition as it was read of what hate and bias is? Again, for our students, as the definition of hate and bias was being read, how many of you understood that? And it's okay to say yes, it's okay to say no, it's okay to say I don't know. Wonderful. Great. That's great feedback. Thank you so much. Now, I have a question for our students. How many of you, or who can say what makes them uncomfortable in their schools, or if a teacher or a student has made them uncomfortable about how they look, their ethnicity, their skin color, ability, or any other thing? If you have an example of that, please put that in the chat. So what we're going to do now, Ron, are we going to go ahead and get started with our questions directly, or?
No, what we were going to do, Tiffany, is allow the students and all of our other public to know who, in fact, we're talking with after Dr. McKnight gives a brief presentation. I believe she's going to talk a minute.
Wonderful. Okay.
Leave us. And should she want to stay on for any questions, feel free, Dr. McKnight. But we do know and appreciate your busy schedule.
Thank you so much. Dr. McKnight, you have the floor.
Okay. Well, first of all, good evening, everyone. It's great to see you all. Chair Wright and Co-Chair Kelly, thank you so much for taking up the leadership of this work in our county on behalf of this task force. I think it is so important. MCPS is one component of our community of Montgomery County, but it's a big component, right? And one of the biggest components that I say prepares us for the future of the type of community that we want to have. So I thank you for inviting us and making us a critical part of this work, because we have an opportunity to shift things in the way that benefits our students now and for students in the future. And I know that it's, whenever we're charged to like chair and co-chair some of these committees, sometimes it feels like a whole nother job. So I know it's not an easy task, but know that I appreciate members of our community feeling so committed to this work to step in and lead it. So I just wanted to give some brief remarks because I know what the night holds. And so tonight, I believe, is going to be the beginning of a very, very important and critical dialogue that must happen in our community. And it's about our African-American students and the issues that they face around hate, bias, and racism right here in our county. And I think it's one of the most powerful things that we can do is to make their voices a center part of our work, because their lived experiences are ones that we continue to have to hold up as valuable experiences so that we can learn from them, but most importantly, make them better. So thank you for giving me the opportunity just to come on and welcome everybody. And thank you for your leadership around this work. But I'm going to tell you, I think my voice is the least important in this space tonight. I think the most important voices are the voices of the students who are here. And tonight, I know they're going to have the opportunity to share an account of their experiences. And I'm grateful to you students for your honesty. I've already been looking at some things that you've been putting in the chat, and know that we can't fix anything unless we know what the problems are and what the real experiences are that must be fixed. So thank you for your honesty, for your vulnerability, because I also know that when you share these experiences, it's almost like in some ways repeated impact when you have to talk about the things that are not pleasant things that have happened that you want to change. But I want you to know that we honor the fact that you've brought forward your accounts, you're sharing them with us, and you're creating space to be vulnerable. So for that, I am grateful. There are lots of MCPS staff here tonight. I will go off camera and do a lot of listening, but we're here. And a big reflection that we've been having as a leadership team has been how important it is to lead by listening. And tonight, I know that we're going to be really engaged in listening while helping to facilitate our students to make sure they have the support that they need. But every time we're listening, we become more empowered to be able to make the changes that are necessary to make. So thank you.
I'm sorry.
I really
Dr.
appreciate
McKnight, Dr. McKnight, thank you so much. I also failed to mention we have Selena Singleton on the call. She is with the County Council. Selena, thank you so much for being here. And it is particularly powerful that we have so many students here this evening. How many of our students, if you want to answer in the chat, feel that our school district does enough to include your voice or to hear from you about issues that are concerning you? How many of our students feel like the district really seeks to hear from them and listens to them about the concerns that they have? Please just answer right in the chat. Okay, Ron, you can move on to the next agenda item as our students answer.
Well, what we wanted to do again is have the MCPS partners who are with us tonight just quickly introduce themselves so that if anyone on the line, particularly our students, want to specifically address this question to one of you or all of you, they will know who that person is and what their responsibility is in MCPS. So why don't we start with John? How are you, John?
Hi, everyone. I'm John Landsman. I'm the Executive Director in the Office of Strategic Initiatives. Damon?
Yeah, thank you. Hello, everybody. Damon Monteleone, Associate Superintendent in the Office of School Support and Wellbeing. And I work with and support our social workers, our counselors, our psychologists, our restorative justice unit, and many other programs and services that cut across all 211 schools. And just a previous job that I had that gives me a perspective on on all of these issues from the school level and the reality that our students face every day. I was the principal of Richard Montgomery High School for 7 years. So I appreciate being here and thank you for this opportunity.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Anthony Olson. I am the director of the Equity Unit.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Shauna K. Jornby. I'm the Director of Student Engagement, Behavioral Health, and Academics. And I primarily work with the social workers, our Alt-1 program, RJ, Mindfulness, and some of our partnerships like the Bridge to Wellness. And I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Hope McGuire, who's our program manager.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Hope McGuire. I'm Program Manager in Student Engagement, Behavioral Health, and Academics. And so I liaise with the Department of Health and Human Services, Child, Family, Youth Services, with linkages to learning, Bridge to Wellness, and the rec department with Excel Beyond the Bell. But I come today also as a mother of 3 young African-American adults. Greg.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Greg Edmondson, Director of Student Welfare and Compliance, and I work very closely with our schools to support our students with bullying, harassment, cases of intimidation and discrimination, and specifically around the hate bias incidents within our schools. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here, Greg. And School Board Member Wolf? Okay, so we know she's here. So
I am here. Thank
oh,
you.
There you are.
Yes, I'm here. I'm very glad to see the crowd that we have tonight. And I'm especially pleased to see the number of students that are on. And I welcome your comments. And I see that you've already been very active in the chat. So know that I'm here listening. Know that your voices do matter. And know that I will take this back to the board and share with them. Thank you.
So we're going to open it up again, Tiffany, so we can have the participation of more students. I did want to acknowledge some other students I think that were brought on by MCPS. John, did you want to do that?
Sure. We have hopefully a few students that Mr. Williams from Minority Scholars Program asked to come today to speak about their experiences. If you're one of those students, if you could just turn your camera on or so we can see who you are. Malik, I think, was one. Or, okay, good. There's a few. If you can, as you come on, just tell us your name and your school.
Hi, my name is Mafe Sakoni. I go to Walter Johnson.
Thank you for being here.
Hello, my name is Nicole Correa, and I go to Rockville High School.
Thanks. Any other students from, oh, there we go, Clem.
Hello, my name is Clem Hodder, and I'm also from Rockville High School.
Hello, my name is Dana Panyawa, and I go to Earl B. Wood Middle School.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
These students and all students. And so we're going to turn it back over to Ms. Kelly again, so we can open the floor for more questions and
all right,
make the kind of organic experience that we need to have.
Absolutely. Thank you. I am noticing a wide range of responses in the chat, and I can't wait to really dig deep with you all at some point. We have to kind of just get the surface of things, but it is interesting to see that there's a wide range of some that feel like the schools are doing a lot or the district is doing a lot, but there are some who feel like their experience could be different. For those that see that there's a lot of work being done, please list some of those examples in the chat. For those of you that feel like there's a bit more work we need to do, please tell me why if you can put that into words. What do you need to see that you aren't seeing at your school as it relates to hate and bias? Another question that I have for those that did not answer that question, sometimes my son says that this work is not a big deal. And I want to know, do you think it's a big deal? Is it something we need to be working on? Or are we just kind of hyping this up a little bit too much? Please feel free to be honest. And if you want to, please change your name so that you can be honest. All right, Ron.
Yes.
Go ahead and go to the next question.
Everyone, in talking with our MCPS partners and parents and teachers in our cohort, we thought we would ask as a cohort a few questions that would also continue this free flow of exchange. But what I want to do again is, applaud everyone who's on from MCPS, because this is indeed a sacrifice. Work is being done, and we have all read about the MCPS audit around these issues. And so I would pose a question to the team, the MCPS team, about the audit, the criteria that's now being applied within the school systems. Could we have you all to talk about that? And then if there are any questions from our students about that process, please feel free to pose your questions.
Ron, could you just repeat that question real quick? I'm sorry.
Well, my question is about the implementation of the MCPS audit and the new criteria. What is the experience? Are we doing that? And what, if any, experience do we have thus far?
Great, thanks.
And how that's working?
Great.
So the audit has been completed. It was shared with the public during our November meeting. And then in the May meeting, we did have an opportunity to share, actually it was the October meeting. And then in the May meeting, we were able to share the anti-racist system action plan. The action plan aligns itself to the 6 domains that were identified within the audit, but it's broken up into 3 particular areas. It looks at what are we going to do at a system level, the school level, and then also those cross domains, looking at how the 6 areas are going across from there. And so we also have published a live document that allows all individuals to go on and track our progress, and we can ensure that those links are placed into the chat for those to see. And so online, you're able to see the action plan that identifies the steps that we as a system are committed to taking. In addition, you're able to find that live tracker that allows you to see where are we in regards to updates. That tracker is going to be updated quarterly to give individuals an update as to where are we. You said you're going to do this, so what exactly have you done? Where are you in progress with doing those things? As it specifically pertains to hate bias, one of the things that you will see specifically called out is as we look at school culture, which is in domain 1, right? Looking at what are structures that we can put in place to support students and community members with being able to engage in conversations around the experiences they have had. You will also be able to see within that particular domain, we'll begin to look at the levels of racism that are exhibited within schools and how they are identified in the school improvement plan. The rationale behind that is that if we are able to identify what the levels of racism are, those are the levels that are contributing to the experiences that students, staff members, and families are having. We then can specifically work to identify how we build capacity and then begin to have data to track. So we've built the capacity, what difference has it made? What impact are we seeing as a result of that? In addition, you will find that all of our leaders, we started last year with central services, we've now moved down to schools, our building level leaders, receiving 16 hours of specific training on being an anti-racist leader, building leader, and what does that mean to be an anti-racist leader? How does that show up in our disposition, in our actions, our beliefs, how we engage and interact with one another? So those are some of the pieces that we've done. The work is massive. And so that's really just the tip of the iceberg. It's designed to be a 3 to 5 year plan, looking at what are the first steps that we need to do, recognizing that even when those things are done, the work is not done. The work continues. We recognize that this is a very nuanced, racism is a very nuanced piece. And so we must be nuanced in our response and nuanced in our actions and how we move and shift and change. We also have tried to make sure that it's understood that this is a working document. And so while this is the areas that we're focusing on right now, we recognize that other issues may occur that we must then say, you know what, we didn't really cover that to the level that we needed to. And so we need to look at how do we adapt and morph and change so that we are responsive to the needs of all those who are being impacted by the things that are going on, particularly as in this space are anti-Black racism.
Thank you, Dr. Alston. And, I would think some of this might be above the heads of some of us. I know some of us is above my head, but I would just want to focus in a little more granular on whether or not this is a better vehicle for one, encouraging more reporting of hate crimes, bias, and incidents. And would it be a more friendlier process for our students to lodge complaints as they encounter them with MCPS?
And so the intent is that it is a more friendlier and easier manner for our students to lodge those complaints. I think it's very much important that we continue as we begin the audit by getting the feedback, asking our students what they're experiencing. And I think there are two parts, and I was in a meeting earlier where I named the same thing, right? It's not just that we ask and that we listen, but two, that we believe what's being said, right? And so if the response is, it can't just be that we say, well, we went out and we listened and we heard the voices. We have to believe what they're saying, what our the voices are saying, but then thirdly, we must act upon it, right? And so it's great that you listen, but if we don't believe you and we don't do anything about it, we've actually just re-traumatized you. We've asked you to rehash the events that have occurred, and we've done nothing to change the outcomes. And so I think it's a matter of those three things. It's the listening, it's the believing, and the action. And so we'll put things in place, but then it's important that we go back and we survey students and we get small focus groups so we can ask them, how is this experience? Has it shifted? Is it easier? Do you feel as though you have more trusted adults within the building that you can then report to? And if the answer is still no, we then need to come back to the drawing board and not go on the assumption that we are the educators, and because we said it, this is the way it's going to be, and that we're always right. We must be able to acknowledge when we've made missteps and that there are things that we have to go back and revise and correct and amend.
Okay, wonderful, Dr. Alston. And before we pivot back over to Ms. Kelly, I just want to open it up to our students, those who are allowed to go on camera. If you want to ask a question of Dr. Alston on that issue regarding the audit and the new tools for reporting hate crimes, incidents, and bias, and or even the other students who are not on camera. If there are any questions on that issue, if not, then we will move on. Anybody have any questions of Dr. Alston or the MCPS team on that issue?
And my students, if you have a question, please put it in the chat, and I am
in
monitoring the chat. Yes, please be sure you answer in the ask questions in the chat. And while we wait for your responses,
Okay.
Quessy, are you one of my SSL students, or are you another student? If you're one of my students, just please put your question into the chat.
Understood. I apologize very much. I'm not of any of you guys' students, but I do have a question in particular about
Go ahead, Quessy.
this situation.
I'm sorry, are you a student?
Not with you, but I'm a student at James Hubert Blake High School.
Right. So are you a student here for SSL hours?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Okay, if you could please only respond in the chat, and please keep your camera off.
Yes,
that's what I'm asking. Okay, thank you. Yes, any SSL students, please do not come on camera and please do not unmute. That is an SSL hour opportunity requirement. You are not allowed to be recorded. So if you could please pose your question in the chat and I will speak out for you. Thank you so much.
Nicole, are you able to talk?
Hi, yeah, I was one of the students that Mr. Williams told to come to the meeting today. Is it okay if I ask my question?
Absolutely, Nicole, go right ahead.
So I know that every year we take a survey about school climate, how we feel about teachers and the students we go to school with every day. But my question is, what does the MCPS board do with everybody's responses?
Responses tonight?
Yeah, I'm happy to field that, everybody.
Okay. Go ahead.
So we have so there had the most recent survey, right? That was district wide, I believe, and I guess John or Anthony, if you want to correct me here, was the anti-racist audit. We have schools. I can't say this with certainty, but I would bet a lot of money that every single school engages in some sort of student voice survey. So for the student that asked that question, there has not been a district-wide survey on bullying, right, or hate bias, or climate, or culture in since the anti-racist audit. So when your schools do those voice surveys and they ask questions, most often the questions they're asking are going to be aligned to the culture, right, or the issues that they're seeing in their schools, or things that students or parents or staff may have raised to them. And a common practice for principals when they get that data is to share it and disaggregate it with their instructional leadership teams, with their director, who is their supervisor, the school director, and to use that voice data to plan really for school improvement and how to make the school more welcome, inclusive, inviting, tolerant, and anti-racist environment, but also to see if students have trusted adults, what the level of teaching is, so that they're supposed to use that data that they create for themselves as part of the school improvement process.
Was that answer clear for everyone, or did we need some clarity as to the answer? Was everybody clear on that? What happens with your data? And if you weren't clear, it's fine. And if you were clear, that's also fine. But for the person that asked, were you clear?
Yes, that was very clear.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great deal. All right, wonderful. Okay, we have a chat question from the gentleman that had a question. Is it Kwesi? Dr. Anthony, have you ever been affected with racism or any biased behaviors? Is that for Dr. Alston? Dr. Alston, have you ever been affected by racism or any biased behavior? That is a question for you, Dr. Alston, if you feel comfortable asking, and that's from one of our students.
Yes, I absolutely have been. As a Black male, I expect it.
Do any of our students here expect to be treated differently because of anything that makes them a protected class? I would love to see that in the chat. Okay, a lot of yeses. Of those that are saying yes, do you feel that your school listens to you, or if they even understand what's going on? For all of our students that are answering yes to that question, do you expect your schools to understand, and do they try to change things for you? Okay. A lot of responses if you're able to peek in the chat. Do any of you feel that things are different now as it relates to hate and bias or issues regarding differences? Do you feel that they are going up, down, or staying the same? Are there more issues, less issues, or are they staying the same in our schools? Would love to hear that. So as you all answer, we're going to go to Ron and go on with our agenda.
I had a question relating to the last topic. I'm one of the students that Mr. Williams asked to speak. So over the summer at the internship we talked a lot about restorative justice coaches and restorative justice in general. I didn't realize that schools have restorative justice coaches. A lot of the interns made it clear that that's not something that has been made readily available, or that schools have not really put a lot of emphasis on informing students about the restorative justice coaches. Are they involved at all in that process of reporting incidents or carrying out the response to discriminatory instances?
And Ms. Kelly, I think I can take that. Hi, everyone. It's Shauna Kate Jornby. I'm the Director of Student Engagement, and we work with the Restorative Justice Unit. And I'm glad you put that question forward. Restorative justice coaches are new as of just last year. So last year, for the first time, we added elementary school coaches for the first time. And the year before was the first year that we added our secondary cohort. So they've only existed for 2 years. And we've been working really hard to get them out there into the school community so that students, parents, staff know how to use them appropriately. In the last year, since our elementary schools have started and our middle schools have started, they've been working on getting specialized training through their monthly PLCs. They've worked together to cohort around strategies for their schools, and they're getting more and more involved with the work of making sure that we're not just responsive to student concerns, but proactive in how we build the environment. One of the things I'm really happy about in order for you to get to know your coaches better is that this year, if you go to the RJ website, if you look at the very bottom, there's a link and it's a live Excel sheet that tells you who your RJ coach is in your school and who your central office specialist is. And I'm gonna get off camera and see if I can add that into the chat for you, if that answers your question.
Okay, thank you so much. That was very helpful.
Yep.
So we had, let me see if I can pivot it back. John, you had your hand up a little while ago. Did you still want to comment? I think it was during Dr. Alston's talk. Is there something you wanted to add to that?
I just wanted to add on that there are sort of two things happening at the same time. Some of it is how do we respond to when hate bias happens? And the anti-racist audit is to create systemic approaches so that we don't keep having these issues. So I just want to make clear we have a number of different things happening. One is how to make the process better to respond when something happens, which is, I think, some of the questions that are going on in the chat. And at the same time, the anti-racist action plan is how can we create a system that is more equitable as we move forward?
Okay. And we saw our cohort member Joseph Hook's hand up for a little while. Joe, did you want to chime in?
Yes, just real quick. I thought the question was really great about the surveys that are collected and how they're shared. I heard Mr. Damon talk about internally and supervisors, but I think what I'm hearing from students is there a better way to have that more public and sharing amongst their school websites, social media, things like that, so they can see their voices being heard and shared, so that they can kind of grasp that if things are going higher or lower, be more comfortable to speak out and share their experiences that aren't being reported. So I would just ask or hope to see if MCPS would maybe help support MCPS principals to, if you collect a survey, to share it out externally, as well as hearing Ms. Shauna about the link for restorative justice coaches. You know, there's a lot of information online and links, but just between maybe an app or student emails of how can students better receive this information in a faster time to know how to use it. It's a lot in a day, classes, coaches, teams and things. I think it could be great to have this shout out. I know there's a lot of information in the new school year of, hey, I'm your restorative justice coach, or things like that. So I do serve at a partner with Identity at a few wellness centers. There's many resources, but if we don't see them, know them, or know the best of them, they can't be used as best as possible. So just wanted to ask about is that possible to make it more public for the surveys that are being collected, so the students can speak on behalf and see what if their voices are being heard.
So Mr.
We have a
Hook,
comment in the chat that I would like to share. Someone has stated the Stronger Student app is not endorsed and has not been mentioned to my knowledge at my school. So we could be dealing with some gaps in understanding of what is out there and how it is to be used.
Yeah. So Damon, were you going to respond to Joe?
Sure, I'd be happy to respond to Mr. Hooks, and then there was also I think a question in the chat by a student, and I'm struggling to find it now. Is it Anaya? And I hope I pronounced that name correctly, and if I didn't, please correct me. But Mr. Hooks, I think, so first of all, it's a great point and a best practice for principals. Anytime you give a survey, if you give a staff survey, share the disaggregated results to staff, right? If you give a parent survey, share the results with staff and engage the parents of the students or the teachers, right? In those survey results. and then work with them to figure out how we can improve the environment based on those survey results. Your point is a good one. I will definitely bring that back to my 3 associate colleagues who supervise principals. We need to work with our principal leaders directly around that. I think it's a fair point, and it is something we should elevate and systematize across the district. So I'm definitely going to work on that. Oftentimes, you have a high degree of variability. Some principals will share that data. Some principals may not share that data. And it's because it's a school-created survey. It lives with them, but more guidance is absolutely necessary. I think in terms of the app itself, the Stronger Student app, and the social workers, right? The social worker coaches. We can always do better to communicate. So let me just say that up front. We can always do better to communicate about the supports for students with bullying or hate bias. We can always do better to communicate about the wellness resources we have available. I will say that we have one piece in place for the Stronger Student app. In addition to it being like online and MCPS putting it out on social media, we did share this with our principals in our mandatory training in August, and asked for them to share it with all their staff and with their families and with their students, right, at back to school night and during the first week of school. So I will double back on that as well. And we may want to consider a direct message to students through their Canvas pages on that. We have found in general, and I have a son who just graduated, I have another one in 10th grade, that when we email students, just the reality, when we email students information to their MCPS emails, they don't often get read, and the students will tell us that. Where the students go is to their Canvas page, because that is where their assignments are located. So this is something that we've been doing. I will also another communication that goes out monthly from my office is the student newsletter from Michelle Cherry. And so the second thing I'm going to take back that goes to every student's Canvas page and their email, we are going to put that Stronger Student app in that newsletter as well. One last thing, and I know I'm talking a lot. I wanted to honor Anya's. I think it's Anya. The question was. Sorry,
they are both trying to skip school right now.
A question was asked by the student: what happens when we how long do these investigations take if we report another student for bullying or hate bias? And to the students out there, it really depends on the length of the investigation. And so every school will work with their director and with the Office of Compliance, Mr. Edmondson's office, on those investigations. And then when we need to involve the police, if it's deemed a hate crime by police, we will. So sometimes these things don't take very long, and sometimes they're complex and take longer. So there is no short and sweet answer. In terms of your teachers, and again, I will speak from experience here as a former principal. Students, first of all, the principals and the teachers need to have good relationships with their students and allow students to have a trusted adult, so they will share this information. Once we receive this information from a student, from a parent, from anybody, we do not reveal necessarily where we got that information from unless it's okay with the student. And sometimes we will have teachers who will let us know about other staff who are saying things that they may think is inappropriate or racist, and we will also pursue that. Once we get something on a teacher, it is a personnel matter, and teachers' personnel and all staff personnel files are protected by Maryland law. So what I can tell you is there's an investigative process that, again, the principals engage in with a different level, a different Office of Compliance, the Office of Compliance and Investigates staff, and then we go through that process. And depending upon the due process of the teacher and the interviews that are taken or the staff member, any level of discipline can be applied. It could be a reprimand. It could be that somebody may go out on leave. And in some cases, we have had to really reallocate our staff out of certain school environments where too much harm has been done. So there's really no one-stop shop answer, but that is really what happens when those reports are submitted. Thank you for giving me that time.
And before we pivot back to Tiffany, I think we saw Siona's hand up. Did you still, or did you get your
Yeah,
question answered, Siona?
yeah. Well,
And,
oh,
okay,
my
good.
question is gonna be about social workers because obviously there's not like much awareness about them within our schools, and I feel like they're better suited to deal with these incidents rather than school counselors because they have to deal with like college recommendations and all that, so they might not be able to have time or know how to handle that. So I guess on top of that, last year we did have some issues with hate bias, but when we spoke to our principal, if we wanted to like report it, we would have to go through this very long process. Like he gave us this paper and it's like you have to fill out a form, you have to wait for that form to go in. It was just like a whole lot, and then it kind of made it seem like if you wanted to report it, then it might feel like it's too much. So is there, I guess, going to be a way where you can report what happens to you and then like have the adult like have a more hands-on approach rather than like having it all on the kid?
I want to piggyback off of that statement. That sounds like an access issue and takes for granted that everyone can read, write, and comprehend at the same level. That's something that we may need to look into if it's become a cumbersome process to report when you're being hurt. We shouldn't make a form, maybe. We should perhaps consider more access versus less. I think that's what the student is saying.
So we do have, this is Greg Edmondson. We do have multiple ways to report. We have about 9 different ways that you can report. The form is just one of them. As far as an official MCPS form, you can simply send an email to your counselor or to your administrator, and they are directed to follow the process to investigate. They will gather all of the information that's on the official form, and they will enter that into our Synergy computer system, and investigate and again follow through the process. So the form is just one avenue, and again, that the Stronger Student app has multiple avenues in which a student can report, but even a simple email can start an investigation to their school, to their counselor, to their teacher. They can even send them directly to my office at SWC at MCPS, MD. So we don't want any barriers for a student to be able to report a complaint or a concern. And even a phone call from a parent to my office, and we'll start the process of gathering all the information so that it can be investigated.
So Siona, did you?
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Yeah. No, I was just going to ask Siona, just to pivot back, did you get a response if you made a complaint? Did you eventually get a response, or is this a situation that's still lingering for you?
This situation, it came up actually because there was an incident with another student that I knew, and when she went to go talk to her administrator, nothing was necessarily done. So when we brought this up to our principal in regards to us feeling like he was paying more attention to other minority groups compared to ours, then that's when he showed us the form in which, like, if it were to happen again, then this is like the avenue we would have to take. So it's not necessarily that I had to fill it out.
Okay, so but you did not get the other options of how you could make a complaint.
No, they made it seem like that was like the only way.
That was the only one. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So
And
there
Siona,
seems
I'm
to
happy
be
to
a
follow up
gap
with
in
that.
there seems
I'm
to be
happy
a
to-
gap in understanding. So yeah.
And for that particular instance, without getting onto it in this call, I'm happy to follow up with you if you want to contact me. I can put my number and name in the chat there.
So I'm going to ask students another question. This is for response. How many students have an experience or feel like they are ignored when they have a concern? I would like to know how many of you feel like you are ignored or feel like you were ignored when you had a concern. Okay, I see the responses coming in. lot. There was a question asked earlier when I asked you all, how many of you expect to be treated differently because of a difference you have? And a lot of you answered that you do expect to be treated differently. How does that make you feel? Stressed, anxious, you don't think about it, you block it out? How does it feel to expect to be treated differently because of a difference that you may have? How many of you dread going to school because of that feeling? How many of you feel like you can learn your best when you're feeling like that? Thank you for responding. I really appreciate your responses because we just don't hear it enough from our students, and I really like to hear what you're experiencing. Okay, Ron, I'm going to pass it back to you as those answers come in.
Yeah, and we need to delve into some of those answers, definitely. So we have a hand up from Marvin Hungle. Marvin, would you like to introduce yourself and let us know what you're thinking about?
Hi, I'm also one of Mr. Williams' students, but I didn't get to introduce myself. I'm Marvin.
Okay.
I go to Rockville High School. And my question is, like, after you guys take all our input about like racism and stuff, like what happens to that staff or like students that like started the problem to begin with? Like what happens to
Is your question for MCPS?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I guess I'll start, and I don't know if Mr. Edmondson or somebody wants to hop in here, but so anytime we have a bullying or hate bias report, and is incumbent upon, it's required that the school administration, talking about a student to another student, investigate that, and they have criteria for what defines bullying or hate bias. It's not just the perception of the individual principal. So there's mandated criteria, there's language from our board policy on this and regulation that the principals need to use. And then they go through and they identify whether or not this in fact meets the threshold for bullying or an act of hate, an incident of hate, potentially a hate crime. They need to investigate that. And they need to close out that case and work with their director. And if they have questions on this, and they work directly with Mr. Edmondson's office, the Office of Student Welfare and Compliance. There is, according to the Code of Conduct, right, we have disciplinary measures that we implement depending on the severity, right, and depending on what the Code of Conduct indicates for the student. For the staff member, and right, then there's also, beyond that, there are restorative approaches that we can use on the back end. If both parties and both families are amenable, we can bring people in to have a healing circle, to have, to have a conversation, restorative conversation, if both parties are amenable. With a staff member, as was shared earlier, as soon as anything is reported about a staff member saying something that is intolerant, insensitive, outright racist, a microaggression, whatever it may be, that needs to be investigated, and that the staff member will have due process. I'll give you a scenario. As a principal, if I were to get something, I would call the staff member in. I would say, I have this evidence that you said X, Y, or Z in class. Are you aware of how that may have landed with students of color? Do you realize this is aggressive or a microaggression or is racist? And get their take and give them due process, take a statement from them on that. And then we have an entire process that we follow for staff investigations. And depending upon the level of severity, there are different disciplinary consequences for staff, anywhere from a documentation that goes in their file to a reprimand, sometimes going on leave. I mean, there are cases even where staff are removed from the district. And there are many instances where a staff has done such harm, perhaps to a class or a school community, that they need to be reallocated away from that school. So these are just some scenarios, but every one of them is investigated, and we know that the public sometimes, like, they don't do anything. It's because we can't publicly declare what is done for any student, right? It's against the law, their confidentiality, or for our staff. It's also against the law. And so as a principal, I would often have times where a parent would say, this student did X or Y to my child. What did you do to that student? Did you suspend them? And what I would have to say to the parent is, I can't reveal what the disciplinary consequence was for that student. I'm not going to share another parent's child's information with you, the same way that I wouldn't share any information about your child with another parent. But that is really the extent of it. And I know that that isn't often satisfactory for folks, but those are the parameters within which that we work.
Well, Damon, I would ask a follow-up on Marvin's question. So in addressing the alleged perpetrator, administrator, teacher, whatever, what, if anything, does MPS do to ensure the safety of the student in this process? Albeit it is a process that we're trying to protect the status of the MCPS employee. But what, if any, steps are we taking to create a safer space for the complaining student?
So oftentimes, yeah, thank you, Mr. Landsman. So he's putting this document in here for addressing all of this, but oftentimes a student, it can be anonymous. 90% of the times we'll hear something is when a teacher may say something in class, right? They'll say something in front of 30 students, and we will hear, hey, teacher said this and this, and all the students of color took it this way. And then that's anonymous. And so the teacher doesn't know which student is actually saying anything. And if a student is willing, if it's something that a teacher or a staff member does or says to an individual student, then we have to work with the parents, and we would work out a plan. Sometimes that student may be in a different teacher's classroom. And then we certainly have safeguards in place to ensure that there is no retaliation against a staff member in a system like that. But we have a safety plan in place for any time a student would be able to give us information, whether it is about another student or a staff member. We have protocols for that.
Okay. So we have another cohort member hand up, Reverend James Boney.
Let me just say this really quickly. After Reverend Boney, we are going to take a 5-minute bio break. We do have students on this line. I know they may need to get up and stretch. We're going to take a 5-minute break right after Reverend Boney. Thank you.
Well, we can go on with questions if we got about 30 minutes left. So should anyone need to go to the restroom, just go and come back.
Okay, thank you. The question has to do with the statement that Damon just made about the process. In terms of our task force, it will be good to know and have the definition that MPS uses when you say if something is reported, you check it against your definition of a hate crime or racism or something like that. We like to see what that definition is that you're actually using. The second question is, do you track number of things that are reported against those that are actually confirmed against groups? Say, for example, number reported incidents for Blacks versus confirmed number of incidents reported for the Spanish community versus number confirmed. Because then, if we could see those, we can see whether there's any biases in the number of things that are reported against those that are actually confirmed, if there's any discrepancies amongst the groups. So we like to get that information as well. Thank you.
We thank you for that question. We do track And that's part of the reason why we asked that the forms were completed. And it doesn't have to be the student that completes the forms, but that's the reason for the form completion, so that we have those hard data points to compare and do that tracking piece. Something else that was brought up that I also wanted to touch on is that, the comment was made that not every student, or some students, were just hearing about the various ways in which they can report. Our audit proved that to us. One of the things that it named was that one of the things that we must work on as a system is a sense of coherence, right? And so what we have is that one school does it this way and advertises this way, and another school doesn't really advertise at all. We look at coherence in regards to when an offense is occurring or has occurred, the use of the student code of conduct, right? Are schools actually looking at the student code of conduct and administering consequences that align themselves to what's outlined in the student code of conduct? And so that's one thing that we have absolutely begun to double down on, is looking at how do we create a greater sense of coherence and alignment so there's consistency across schools. So it's not that you hear this story from one school and another school says, I know, what are you talking about? I've never heard, we have a what? Right? And how do we increase that alignment and that coherence? So that is something that we have been diligently working on this year.
Reverend Boney, you have a follow-up?
No. That was it. It's just
Okay.
that having those definitions that we could take a look at, and also to
Absolutely.
look at the number that are reported against and the number that are confirmed as actual incidents of hate crimes or racism against the different groups, but to see if there's any discrepancies across the groups.
Absolutely. I think that's an important question. Tiffany, before we switch back over to you, we have one other hand up. Kwesi again. Kwesi, did you have another question?
Kwesi, if you do have a question, just please put it into the chat. Thank you.
Is he one
what
of
are
your
some-
students?
Yes.
Okay, I thought he talked before. Okay, yeah, put that in the
What
chat.
what are some of the after effects any of you have had after being treated the way you have been, if you've been treated in a biased manner? So any of the adults that are on the line, what are some of the after effects any of you have had after being treated the way you have been, if you were treated in a biased manner? I can say for me, Kwesi, that it makes me suspicious that I'm going to be treated that way again. So I'm always on defense, which is actually very stressful. I can say that. Okay. All right. So
Damon,
I
did
have a
you-
question now
Go
for our,
ahead. Go ahead, Tiffany. Yeah. We'll come back to
I have
Damon.
a question. I have a question for our staff, because you know that that I engage with a lot of our students and parents, particularly when they feel that they need an advocate. Who determines at the district level what hate and bias incidences are? And that question stems directly from repeatedly hearing that children that are of African descent being punished for using hate speech when they use a word that sometimes is used among peers within their own communities. So who's the person that makes a determination as to what is going to be a hate incident? What is the criteria? Who's at the table? One thing that's offensive to me may not be offensive to someone else. How do you make that determination?
So Damon, you want to go ahead? Your hand is still up.
So I was actually trying to address the question from Mr. Boney about the definitions. I have provided in the chat, right, I guess at 8 o'clock in the chat, you can see a link to our overall website with all the resources and information. And then the two subsequent links are the board approved or board language, right, that define what those hate, bias, and incidents are, and bullying incidents are, and the policy involved with that. And then I would defer to Mr. Evanson for the specifics of those policies and the board process for how that language is agreed upon. But that is board approved language. It is on the website. And my understanding is that all of those are done with our Office of General Counsel, with community input. But again, Mr. Evanson can speak to the specifics, but the language is there.
Yeah, we have direct language from our policy ACA, which is non-discrimination, equity, and cultural proficiency, and is almost identical to the definition that was read in this meeting at the beginning with regards to discrimination based on personal characteristics, race, gender, religion, etc. And I will tell you that we are we work very closely with our partners in MCPD, but we do not make any determination just to talk about whether it's a bias incident or whether it's a crime. So only the police department designates something a crime. If we have a report where somebody feels that they were discriminated against, we start this process. And so we don't determine if it's a crime and then, well, that was not a crime, let's not worry about it. We take all of our allegations seriously and go into an investigation mode with regards to several of the processes that were outlined earlier.
Have you ever seen a Black person charged for a hate crime against another Black person criminally?
Charged from the police?
Mm-hmm.
Not to my knowledge, no.
Well, that begs my question then. MCPS is taking punitive action for Black children using hate speech against what they determine to be hate speech against other Black children. That is the specific question that I'm asking now. And that question has been raised many times by the parents that I know that have children of African descent. So that is why I'm asking, who decides what goes to the level of a hate reportable incident, which automatically involves police, which leaves room for perhaps interaction that may not need to happen. So that is why I asked that question specifically.
No, we've actually had those same complaints, and we are working as a team with several people on this call, as well as with our partners with MCPD to make sure that we are handling these things appropriately. We, as a system, document discriminatory language as a hate bias incident. We know that there are some cases that have been, as you mentioned, let's say, African-American student to African-American student, Black student to Black student, and the intent was not for discriminatory reasons, but it was still documented as a hate bias because of the protocols that we have and the definitions that we've been using, at least for the past several years. So we are looking at that together with not only with this team, but with others to really align our practices to make sure we're doing what we need to do in the best interest of our kids. And
It
making
is
sure
concerning.
our schools are aligned.
It is concerning because it does lead to more of those outcomes that we see that negatively affect people that are of a protected class that we say we're trying to stop within the district. So that was the reason that question was raised. Thank you.
It's a great question, and one that we are grappling with to make sure that all 212 of our schools are aligned with our practice. But there's more discussion that definitely has to be had. I don't know if you recall some of our cases in the past, but it's bringing up a lot of questions about making sure we're protecting our students the way we need to.
I also feel that there could be some concern with us not modernizing our approach to this fight. I shared with our cohort members maybe last week in our meeting that I was looking at something on social media and it was a dog, and the people in the comments were calling the dog what would be considered a racial slur. And it makes me wonder, how are we shifting how we see how our young people are interacting and maybe making it an educational moment versus a punitive approach giving the intent. There's a lot of rigidity here. There's not a lot of room for discernment because we decided to formalize a whole lot of this. And some of this may not be warranted based on the culture of our students today. We are looking at it from a lens of 1950 on, and it really is just different. This is why we really do need to hear from our students a bit more as we craft policy, because if we're doing it from our grown-up lens, we're gonna make missteps.
So you're just bringing up the exact conversations that we've been having recently. I mean, there's a technical piece to this and there's an adaptive piece to this, and we have to make sure we're balancing that for sure. I'm really glad you brought this up.
Yeah,
And one of our students has written,
No, go ahead.
one of our students has written, sometimes white people and Hispanic people deal with bullying too, not just the Blacks.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that student's voice was heard.
Well, that's true, but we are the Black and African American cohort, and we're trying to field questions from our Black and African American students regarding the impact of race bias and hate crimes against this particular community of people. I would ask Greg, though, not to assume that these policies are impenetrable. Is there a process for students and public or parents to impact the policies that we're talking about? Is that initiated by a complaint or a request to be a part of a hearing? How does the public and or students, talk about the need for change in policy with MCPS or the school board?
So we have policy that the board institutes, and then we have regulation that the school implements. And so those are two different things. So our policy ACA is a non-discrimination, equity, and cultural proficiency. And we have policy management committee, which is a subset of the Board of Education. And they reach out for public comment on any changes to our policy, as well as regular reviews based on whether it's that year for that policy to be reviewed. So that's the policy side of things. I think what we're talking about more here is our regulation side of it and how we implement this, and the adaptive pieces that we have to look at with regards to how we implement it within our schools and within our school leaders, and get the input and the stakeholder input. Just like tonight, we're doing some of that, getting that input so that we can work together. Not, my office is compliance, and then I'll work with, Damon's office with schools, Dr. Alston's office with equity and restorative justice. And we'll work to think about how do we not only collaborate, but how do we really calibrate what we're trying to do for our schools. And so to answer your question, there's two different things with policy and then the implementation of it. I don't think anybody's arguing what's in our policy about what discrimination is and what it looks like and feels like and what we need to do to address it. We're talking about how do we go about that process for not only the safety, but for the respect of our students.
Well, I think there might be some challenge with respect to how do we define, though. I mean, there are some, as Tiffany pointed out, some cultural shifts that we have to recognize that have gone on.
And one of the words here is
certain nomenclature. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Ron.
Go ahead, Greg.
One of the words within our policy is intended or unintended. And so when we're using words or we're using acts or when we're behaving in a certain way, what did we intend to do when the victim felt or perceived something in a particular way? And so currently it's intended or unintended as part of the policy. And so that's something that we have to look at for sure with regards to that language.
Okay. Damon, you have your hand up there?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to double down, I think, on what Mrs. Kelly said. And I wanted to align myself and just be really clear with what Greg Edmondson said. This is, we have a policy in place where there may be some unintended consequences, right, for Black students specifically and students of color. And I'm talking about the use of the N-word between Black students when it is perfectly appropriate within the culture and the norms of the students who may be using it. And so we did have a conversation about this exact issue, okay, on Friday. And one of the things that I want to just let this group know is that we have, and again, this isn't going to solve everything, but I want to just peel back the curtain for folks. Every Friday we come together and we look at suspensions, attendance, bullying, hate bias across the district, right? And looking at flare-ups and hotspots so that we can be working in real time to address them and proactively allocate resources if we see some troubling trends. As a result of that conversation, which is really just a quick data conversation, the team diverged for about a half hour into a really lengthy conversation and a really heartfelt conversation that at times was led by our executive staff of color about this particular problem. And so I just want to acknowledge that it's real. I want to let folks know that we can't leave this Zoom with like, hey, we have a solution for it right now. But I do want to say that we are talking about it and that we are not done with this issue.
With us sitting at the table as much as we do, we don't engage our youth nearly as much. And when we see these data trends, I think we should be asking them what's going on, because a lot of times we're guessing. And we are so wrong. I am so not cool, and I am not hip, and I am old as dirt. And my perspective just isn't the same. So I do believe there's an opportunity when we see the data shifting to get the story behind the data in order to effectively address things.
And I wholeheartedly agree that it's very much important that we hear the voices of our students, because our actions impact our students, right? And so we try to do that, and I will be the first to admit that we don't do it as often as we should. So this summer we had the opportunity to work with a Minority Scholars Program. They have summer interns. And so myself, Mr. Landsman, from my staff, we went to them and we worked with them on some professional learning, but we had the opportunity to unpack some aspects of the audit with them to actually hear their voices and chart it down what they were saying. And we used their voices, their responses to our interactions with them to provide further insight, professional learning, and capacity building for central office leaders. I need you to hear what our students are saying about us and our actions and how we're serving them and how we're not serving them. And then how then do we respond differently? In our most recent version of our edition of our Equity Matters newsletter, we have video clips of students sharing their experiences, elevating their voices. And so we try as often as possible to make sure that we not only get their voices, but that we promote their voices and that we push out so that others, the adults, can hear the power of their voices and recognize the impact that their actions have upon our students.
Yeah, absolutely. Reverend Boney, you have your hand up. You want to jump in again?
I do, because we're talking and I'm of an older generation, but we have children on the line. I mean, we have students on the line. I like to know from them. They can respond to the chat. We've been doing it all night. How do they feel when they hear what is offensive words coming from someone that is of their own race or group? They can respond to that.
The question again, Reverend Boney?
Is how do they feel that these are these are African American Black students? How do they feel when someone of their own race calls them the N-word? Are they offended by it or not? I'd like to know.
Okay, so for our students of African descent, when someone that looks like you of African descent calls you the N-word, how does that make you feel? We also have another question to everyone in the chat. I'm not trying to be racist when I ask this question. Why do some white teachers target some Blacks in class? I'm not sure that's an answer that I have for you. Okay, someone says, if we're not close, then I find it disrespectful. Hearing neutral, I don't care. Someone else says, I don't mind. I don't care. Neutral, don't really care. Don't really care. I don't think it's appropriate. A lot of I don't cares. Okay. I think that was a great question because I don't want to make assumptions about how students feel. I'm not a student.
Well, I would pose this question also to students. I don't know if it's too personal, but we do have a cohort that is addressing these same issues with respect to our LGBTQ community and other religious communities, which Black folk and African Americans have intersection with. And so some of our students might be LGBTQ or plus and or Muslim or some other faith. So if you also are getting, bullied or you're feeling hate bias, not just from the use of the N-word, but because you are being bullied because of your sexual orientation or your religion as a Black person, then this also affects you. So should you have any questions about that or concerns, please raise your hand or put those in the chat as well.
I have an answer to the question from one of our students that answered the question.
Okay, there we go. Yeah.
Miss Kelly, I also think there's a really good question in the chat that I don't know any of us have a textbook answer for. And that is the question from the student about why it seems like some white teachers target Black students or students of color. I'm not sure how it was worded. And I'm just going to be honest with folks on this call. We are dealing with human beings, and we are dealing with 25,000 staff members in this system who come to their places of employment with any number of experiences. Many of them, we know, have biases as they enter our space. And we are one of the most, if not the most diverse county and school districts in the country. We have 3 of the most diverse towns, right? Rockville and Silver Spring and Gaithersburg in the country. And so we are trying to address these biases and the complexities of the different cultures and experiences that all of our people have, and where they come together in the schoolhouse every day. And that is what the anti-racist audit is about. And we know that we are doing this work, and it is not, and I'm going to be honest, it is not easy work. As a former principal, I would have these conversations with white staff. And what I would come to realize through some of the course of these conversations with this white staff members, I'm talking to a 40 or 50-year-old white person, a white female who lives in maybe Frederick or an hour from here or Carroll County, and they may not ever come into contact with people of color unless it's the people of color sitting in their classroom. And these are the realities. And so we are determined to make our schools more inclusive and safe for our students. But I want to just let everybody know that we're dealing with human beings that are bringing all of these things into our spaces, and that we are trying to create a system and a culture in the system to address that. And I want to call that's just the reality. I'm going to be brutally honest there. We're dealing with racism that has plagued this country from its inception. And we are trying to tackle that in our schoolhouses with our students.
There's a question in the chat, thank you, Damon, that I want to bring particular attention to. Lex Morgan, thank you. What steps are taken to hear the voices of students that are considered to be the most challenging? As example, students with repeated suspensions. Many times these students are overlooked because they are viewed as troublemakers. You are absolutely correct. Those are the students that I personally make it my mission to advocate for. They are the students that are mistreated and misunderstood a lot. I thank you for that question. And I would like to hear if there's an answer, because quite frankly, I don't think there is.
There is.
Of the advocacy work I do. Okay,
there
Sean.
is, Miss Kelly.
I was gonna see if Stephanie was gonna hit it first. Like, who's gonna hit the button first?
You both do it.
Hi, folks. My name is Stephanie Wallace. I'm the supervisor for the Wellbeing Social Workers in Montgomery County. And that's a great question. And I want you to know that I don't have the magic wand as I wish I would, but I do want you to know that social workers, one of the data points that they use in order to be able to identify their caseload is suspension data. So every social worker has access to the list of students that had suspensions from the previous year. And we also work closely with our school administrators so we can be able to support the students once they've had the suspension, if we didn't have a chance to work with them first. Or we can also collaborate with the school administrators to see if we can identify alternative options for discipline.
So to add on to what Stephanie just said, that's a really important part of the diversion services that we provide, because we transition students from one programming to another. So it might be from a juvenile facility to alternative programs to alternative level 1 services, and Ms. Lopez Arias is on with us, to a comprehensive school programming. So we hear from our students who are most at risk regularly, and we take some of the feedback that they say and we incorporate it with working with our Alt 1 teachers and our RJ specialists. So I think in this group, in this service, we hear a lot from our students who experience exclusionary practices.
So can I just flip this again? So are we keeping data on the students that perpetuate hate crimes, bias, and hate incidents? And do we also know the recidivists and what, if anything, is done with them?
Yes, we are keeping data on every specific incident that's reported and with all of the details that are provided. And then we do data reviews. If we have a school that has a particular jump in reported incidents, if we have a particular student who's involved, we work with others from our MCPS team to get supports in place as necessary. But yes, all that data is collected.
And let me add to that. So we might very well know now where most of these incidents and which schools they're taking place. Is that safe to assume?
So yes, and again, if a school's jumping out where they have like 10 incidents and every other school has 1 or 2, we would have that information. But significant amount of our reports, our schools have like 1 or 2 incidents each. There might be a couple that bubble up, and we get out with the school and with the administration and the school's director to try to figure out what's going on, because it's probably something more than just inappropriate behavior, but there might be some type of bigger challenge that lies ahead if we don't address it right away.
Well, at the risk, I was just going to say, at the risk of digressing just a little bit, I'm still dealing with the BCC and Walter Johnson incident. And maybe you guys are involved in some investigation as to what happened there. But having lived out here for 27 years, I've always heard about incidents at either one or the other of those schools. And I'm just wondering, do we know now what set that incident off? And has it anything to do with repeated incidents of students who are a part of a group that intentionally kind of incites this kind of behavior, or recidivist behavior, if you will?
So I'm not at liberty to share anything about that at this time, because I think some of this is still being under investigation and wouldn't have been released yet. However, on that particular incident, we don't have any information at this time that would suggest that there's an ongoing issue between these 2 schools. But that's really all I would have for you with this.
Ooh, there's been an ongoing issue for years. It's not new.
Peace and blessings.
Exactly.
This is Hashem Jabbar with Racial Justice Now. How you doing, Mr. Wright?
Hey, Hashim, how are you, sir?
I'm thankful, man, to be on here with you and everybody else. Thank you for hosting this, and you're doing an excellent job, Tiffany. Appreciate you as well. So from the community standpoint, I'd like to share some of what we've heard from the community in regards to what happened, and we would like to deliver it from the community side, from that perspective. And so that's the great joy of these programs that you put on. So thank you for hosting us. But the community has been telling us that there's been racial slurs slung at that school for a very long time, and that there's been videos made and whole Instagram channels based upon the racism and the slurs that children have endured over the years at that institution, and the maintenance and the protection of faculties and others that are inflicting this pain, this psychological warfare on students that maintain their positions there. So this is the history, but this is a response of they say in the street, you might say your mouth is talking more than your behind could cash, the checks your behind couldn't cash. And so students were actually, from our investigation, kicked out of the game for ill behavior, racial motivated behavior, and waited for children at the Metro stop to come. So instigated a fight from the side that they wanted to fight. And so according to the videotape, we received a response to the fight. So unfortunately, they got more than what they asked for. So we hope that the Metro will get those cameras as well to see how the fight actually began. So we understand that there was racial slurs that inspired that night. However, we also know that that same inspiration has been in that institution for decades. So thank you for your time, Mr. Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Jabbar. Appreciate that. We have two other hands up. Let's go to John, and then we'll go back to Reverend Boney.
And I don't have any response to that. I think it's something, as Greg said, we can look into a little bit more and then come back to you all to give us any more information. I did want to say that many of our team had to get off at 8:30.
Okay, that's fine, John. Yeah, you did.
We're happy to for y'all to give us more questions and we can respond. We're gonna get the chat also to make sure we're capturing everything, and if more questions come up and you want to send it to us, I did put in the chat for the students who want SSL hours. I put the link in. I'm gonna put it in again.
Okay, now
I'm sorry.
I've not ever quite had this happen before. So there was a form created because typically I send that out after opportunities, but if there's another form, that's absolutely great. I'm more than happy to send that out.
We want to make it as easy as possible for the students.
That sounds great.
They
That
can just
sounds
click
wonderful.
on this and fill it out, and our SSL teacher will get back to them tomorrow.
Okay, that sounds great. So I will actually put this in my responses to my students. They can fill out that form, and that's less work on me, actually. So thank you. I will graciously take that. So with that being said, I think this is the beginning of some great conversation. I do believe we need to have an in-person session. It says that the form you need permission, so you may not have given permission.
I'm going to try to change that. It was made by someone else, but give me a second. If it doesn't work, you can still, it'll work later, but let me try it now. I'll try to fix it.
I am a firm belief that we are definitely missing the mark in some regard, and I think we can do this better, but we must hear from our students. Again, we're coming from a perspective of people that have been out of school for many years. It's a different culture, it's a different era, it's a different time. And I believe that there's opportunity here for us to really address these things in a manner that does not punitively punish students that are of a protected class, namely Black and African American students. But I think that we can't make those decisions alone. We've got to involve our students. So for my students, you'll be hearing from me with this link, and we will be getting together again so that we can really talk. Unfortunately, we couldn't really talk. We had to rely on the chat. So you'll be hearing from me soon. You have my email address. If there's anything that you want to say to me that you couldn't say here, you can record a video and send it to me, or you can write it out. I take voice and I take email, whatever's comfortable for you.
May I also add to that, also those students who are in high schools, every one of your high schools has a social worker. This was a heavy conversation. And if you need to follow up and have a conversation with your, support staff in your school, please know that every single social worker on my team has that anti-racist lunch, cultural awareness, regardless of their race or ethnicity. They're all there to be able to support all of our students and have specific training to be able to work with folks who don't look like them. So please know that there is support available for you at your schools. And I'll even put my email in the chat. So this way, if you are curious to know the name of your social worker, you can feel free to reach out to me.
Okay, so
We
students,
had,
to reiterate that, if there are some things that you need to discuss after this call, because this is a very heavy topic and we know how it can be, Ms. Wallace is going to put her email address in. You can also reach out to her if you need to see a counselor at your school, excuse me, a social worker at your school. And also you all will have gotten an email from me. So if you lose it, you can write me and I'll be sure that you get the resources that you need as well.
okay, so John, thank you again and your team, Damon. Let's see, who else? Stephanie, who is left? Shauna. We didn't hear from Hope. Did we? We heard from Hope and Greg. We heard from Lex. Or did we hear from Lex? But and Brenda, we thank everyone who is here that has to leave. We can hang on a few more minutes if you'd like. There's another hand up. There's another hand up. MCP student. Who's that? Did you want to acknowledge yourself with a question or? I see your hand up.
Was one of the. Yeah, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, I was one of the students Mr. Williams referred to speak, and I had a comment and question regarding the system of like reporting incidents. So I like changed my Zoom name because I wanted to like stay anonymous. Is it okay for me to speak?
Yes.
Okay. So to give more context, I go to a majority school, and I know as a student, students don't typically want to go out their way to report incidents of hate unless it has had a major impact on them, because they may feel like it'll be more trouble than it's worth, and they themselves have been conditioned to deem it as minor. For instance, a friend of mine has had a teacher constantly make arrogant comments regarding race and has linked it to competence. This teacher has had a history of making uncomfortable comments regarding race. However, students are hesitant to take action because when reports have been made, no action has been taken. The teacher has held this reputation for years, so many students I have spoken to feel like it's a lost cause to complain. At my school, there are many incidents similar to these where students have experienced microaggressions from teachers or their fellow classmates. In the internship I did over the summer, the Minority Scholars Cohort talked about how when microaggressions build up and a person is constantly being told harmful statements, it diminishes their self-esteem. No one wants to build up the courage to talk to an adult and be dismissed and have their concerns pushed under the table. It sets a precedence. Given this, I want to ask how schools work to ensure the system put in place to report incidents are efficient, accessible, and change will be made.
I'm sorry to hear.
Yes, young lady.
I am sorry to hear that. And I know it's true because I've worked with families every day that are experiencing this. But we won't know it if we're relying on people to self-report. And I think that's why we're here.
So if the system that we use to report incidents doesn't work, how will incidents be solved? Because there's a precedence. Like students tell the students to go report, they go through that process and then nothing is being done. So students don't feel comfortable. They feel like I feel like personally, it's like a waste of time. You go and you complain and you get vulnerable and you tell them your concerns just for nothing to be done. It's like a slap in the face.
So
for our students that are still on the line, if you have this experience, please put in the chat that you feel the same, or if you've not had this experience, say that this hasn't happened to you.
MSP student. So I did put my email in the chat for anybody, but on my direct team are the 3 associate superintendents that supervise all schools in MCPS. I work directly with them to address these kinds of issues. what I would say is, if something is this egregious as you are saying, and I have every reason to believe based upon what you said that it is, please email me directly, or you can use a different account if you want or whatever. But I would love to know the school and where this is happening, so that we can follow up with that principal and individually with the teacher. Unfortunately, I can't, and I'm just going to be, again, very honest. It's very hard for the 4 or 5 of us on this call to speak for all 212 principals, and why not all of them will do perhaps what needs to be done. We are actively working and coaching and training our principals to respond in the appropriate way. But when I hear personally this type of information, I want to act directly on the issue that has been brought. But we realize there's variability in how principals are responding, and it's our job to do something about it. That's what I can say.
So I will just say thank you to that student, but you have a lot more in the chat that are saying it's their reality as well. We have got to do something differently. We have got to say we're failing here. We need to do something differently, because it's not just that one.
Yeah, so we have 2 other hands up. We have 2 other cohort members with us, Jacqueline Denard and Director James Stowe. So we're going to let Jackie go first, and then Director Stowe. Jacqueline, go ahead.
Okay, my question is to the student. I just wanted to know if she could give somewhat an example or something that the teacher said, or how they responded.
An example like I can think of that wasn't reported was basically this teacher compared a student to 3/5 of a person. And if you know anything about African American history, that's harmful, and it's honestly disgusting. Like, imagine you're like trying to learn something and the teacher is making jokes like that and making fun of your identity.
Did that come from a non-Black teacher?
Yes.
All right. Director Stowe, you want to jump in?
Yes. First of all, good evening to everyone, and just want to thank all the folks who are with Montgomery County Public Schools for their participation, and all of the students, particularly for their very forthright. And even though it may not be quite as direct as Stephanie may suggested, they may not have been authentic, I think is a better word, with this particular format. I'm glad that they spoke with the honesty that they did and the frankness. I really appreciate that very much indeed. I got 2 questions. I'll be quick. I know we're trying to move to something else and maybe end the call. But I wanted to ask the students, of any of them that are still on the call, whether or not they believe that their educational opportunity is being impacted and their pursuit to become what they believe from a potential standpoint that they can become by some of the negative behavior that we've discussed tonight. Is that a clear question? If not, can you help me, Tiffany, maybe state a little bit better?
Okay. Did everyone understand the question? If you did not, just put in there that you need it to be repeated, and I can help to frame it a little differently. Okay, Elijah says it is not being impacted. Is your educational experience being impacted because of what you're experiencing? If it wasn't for my parents, I would say yes, my education would be impacted. But everyone doesn't have my parents or people who can speak up for them. That resonates with me. That resonates with me big time. Everybody doesn't have a parent like yours or me. So I'm trying to parent other people's children and parent the parents and get them what they need, because they don't necessarily have something, or their own experience was so bad that they're intimidated.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Cindy. That is
John, you're still with us? Did you have another question? Or
I just want to make 2 quick comments. One is these are powerful stories, and so a lot of our team didn't want to get off because they didn't want you to think that we didn't want to hear your stories, but
Right, we understand.
actually go. So they're going to get off in a second. And the second thing is just the stories that the students have shared. It's heartbreaking to hear, and at the same time, not surprising, because we have heard these stories in the anti-racist audit in many of the ways we have been getting student voice. And that's the purpose of the work that Dr. Alston was talking about earlier. And we have a long way to go. And it is always heartbreaking to continue to hear these stories. And it's not just going to be addressed by one person complaint, putting in a report. It has to be systemic. And so we're really trying to do two things at the same time. How do we address the individual issues as they come up, but how do we change the system? So like earlier on when one of the students was talking, we not only have to train the teachers, the administrators, but also the directors to make sure they're holding these principals accountable. How are we providing the support? So we do have some of that happening. It's not going to have had an effect yet, because much of that is just at the very beginning. But I urge you to please, look at some of what we're doing. We would like to continue having these students in particular, engage in the conversation. So
sure,
Ms. Kelly, we're happy to get the names and continue to follow up. I know we do have a relationship with the MSP students, where we continue to try to go back and get your voices. And as Dr. Alston said, using that as a way of bringing voice and change when we're working with adults. So we really appreciate this opportunity here. We know it's not easy. As Dr. Alston said, it's traumatic every time we ask you to share yet one more story. So we appreciate your time. So as we get off, it's not because we don't think this is really important, but many folks have been on in meetings since 7:30 this morning. So thank you.
One day.
Well, we clearly understand.
And actually,
one more thing before you go.
I had a meeting with Damon and Shauna K a little bit before this, so they have literally been at this all day. So thank you.
Okay. Go ahead, Director Stowe.
Real quick, and Lisa Taylor may can answer this question as well as you, John. Real quickly, is the coming into BCC is the, I'm going to call it bulletin board, or that's not the right word. There was a huge sort of, I guess it was the history of the school when you walk right into the front door. Is that still there?
No, in fact, it's not there because we wrote a letter expressing our concern about how exclusive it was, and that it did include kids of color.
Okay.
Can we expound on what that was? I don't know if everybody's familiar with that.
My kids are graduates of BCC, so I'm talking as a parent as well within the system.
Well, what was their Director? What was the messaging?
The messaging was it was the history of the school, of BCC, and there was not a single black face in this history. And it just seemed to me then, and I'd asked for this while I was a parent, as to just tell the continuing story, not go by and erase that now. I mean, it is what it is. But there's a continuing story that could have been told, that would be a continuation of what was already there. And it never seemed to quite get any real attention. Conversation, yes, but no attention. And so I thought then for every black student coming to that building every single day, every day, that's the front door, they saw this constant reminder of folks, and none of which looked like them. And furthermore, there was nobody in the building that looked like them, but for a few folks in maintenance. I think then later on assistant principal came aboard.
Yeah.
If that's the, and I'm so glad to hear that again, to Madam Chair, Lisa Taylor, for that, because I think that is a step forward. And again, what I don't ever want to do is have our kids be put in a position of somehow or another being the subject of, and the target, maybe a better way of, what we are doing outside of their environment. We will leave this conversation, those of us who don't have don't have children in the district, right? And our lives go very differently than those who are parents, and more importantly, who are students still within the district. And so I just suspect that one of the things that probably has not changed since the beginning of time almost is that they sometimes, our students become, because of you, we get all this grief about our school. Because of you, we're getting all these negative things about our school. I mean, they end up being sometimes the target of these bold initiatives toward trying to right the ship, as it were. And I'm just simply saying that I hope that many more of us can own the process, not just those of you who are school officials, but many more of us, as I'm hearing Tiffany talk about it too. And I know there are a lot of Tiffany's that are in our community, thank God for that, who go beyond, again, parenting their own children, their own students, and trying to impact others. Lisa Taylor's one of those persons. And I'm sure there are others on this call. But we've got to get in a situation where, again, we don't leave our students out there by themselves with these challenges that they're facing. That's why I asked the question, because again, nothing by nobody ought to interfere with their right and their opportunity to achieve and become all they possibly can be within the confines of that school district. And we got to make darn sure that every person, whether he or she is an administrator or a teacher or some other capacity within that school, has as their main reason for being there the success of every single student, regardless of his or her origin within our community. And that, to me, is what the goal ought to be. Beyond anything specific, it ought to be that everybody ought to be committed. And then if they're not, by the way, folks, and there's the issue of accountability. I'm so glad to hear John talk about this issue of accountability. Folks, if I don't perform over and over again, guess what? I don't have a job.
That's right.
I don't have a job.
That's right.
So all I'm saying is that there is a need to get involved in this in real kinds of ways. And again, don't mean to overstate the point that's already been stated here so beautifully before I even got on this call. But I just want to make sure that, again, from somebody who was a parent in this district and what we had to do, and it's so true, because again, if he or she does not have an advocate, we got to find one for he or she. Because again, you've got to have somebody in this district, again, to fight for you. I don't mean that in a violent kind of way, but to advocate a better way, better word rather.
Yeah.
And I'm just hoping we can be able to get that done throughout this system.
Yeah, point well taken, Director Stowe. I too had children in the system, and particular for my son, who early on was labeled as being too aggressive. We spent a couple $100,000 in private school trying to deal with that issue. I will say this, though, in a county where you awaken to a name of a county named after a slave owner is the true awakening. And we still have several schools that are named after slave owners in this county. Progress is what it is. And certainly we got to keep pressing these issues so that we can be heard and change that will be made. We are about 9 minutes away from concluding. I did want to continue to focus on, recommendations and solutions. So I got a two-pronged question, one for MCPS, and you're still on, and then for students to answer. And that is first for MCPS. And we might have asked this question before, that is the cohort. What, if anything, do you want to see the African-American cohort and Black cohort do to assist MCPS and other stakeholders to deal with the hate crimes, bias, and hate incidents in the school system? And the same question to our students. How do you believe this task force, which again, it's framed as a task force, meaning that we are here to supplement some of the things that stakeholders are already doing and agencies are already doing to address these issues in the schools and in public places or whatever. But we will sunset, we will end our duties on November the 28th. We also will be reporting before the 28th on October the 26th. So we'd like to incorporate a lot of what we said tonight, and we will. Oh, by the way, this was recorded, so you can go back on YouTube and hear everything that was said. But I think what we want to get out of this before we go is those two perspectives. What does the MCPS believe how this cohort can help in this effort to assist Black and African American students, and also students if you care to jump in, what do you think we can do to help assist you and also MCPS? But also keeping in mind, it's a shared responsibility.
And you may not have an answer if you want to follow up
John?
later on.
David?
I think there's a couple of things, and I also wanted to respond to some things that are happening in the chat, that there actually is a process for starting a conversation around changing the names of schools in MCPS. I don't have that information. I know that a couple of schools are starting to work on that. There's a process that the board asked us to do, and there's a group within MCPS that is working with some schools to do that. So we can get that information out to you. There is a way to get that started.
Yeah, so I'll put that in there. I'll put that in the chat. In fact, there is a community group right now working on the Magruder name to let folks know. So that is in process right now. But I'll give you the name of the office to contact, and then they facilitate these collaborative conversations with the school communities to change the names.
So is there anything you want to charge the cohort with, MCPS, in assisting you with dealing with hate crimes, bias, and hate incidents?
I think there's a few things based on what I've heard today. One is, I mean, the first is keep holding us accountable, which is where this conversation is good. It makes us rethink our processes, and as Damon said earlier, we've had some good conversations just as a group based on some of the questions that you sent us earlier to start working on some things. I would say the second one is to continue to bring us some of the voices so that we can hear people's experiences. And the third thing is, as we were listening, there are definitely things in place that many people don't know about. So that like some of the forms and the way to follow up and report this. So if we need to do a better job of advertising, which is what many of the students said in the chat. But I also think if we can get help from others and making sure students and families know about that, we can work together in those things as well. And then I guess the last thing I would say is, like, we're happy to, when we develop some resources and tools and training, we are always trying to get people to give us feedback on that. Is it going to meet the needs of what you want? So we're happy to continue engaging in these conversations.
I do want to mention that I do focus groups with students at Gaithersburg Youth Club, which is a high Black, Brown, Farms population of students. And I do a lot of gallery walks with them, and I'm able to elicit some real good qualitative data that helps identify where they're struggling and what they're struggling with. And unfortunately, certain populations just do not have the same level of interaction with technology that others do. So we're missing the mark if we continue to put more forms out there, more things that are tech-based. We almost have to do not this or that, but this and that to really get down to what's going on with our students. So I just want to raise that we may have to go back to just the old-fashioned way of talking and hearing from students. I get a lot of great data that I'm more than happy to share, but I get a lot of great data because I just go in and let them talk.
So I would say the last thing I would say for us that we would like for you to do is just to continue to elevate that this is a need, right? I think that oftentimes that there are groups that are forgotten or overlooked in regards to situations or problems that are occurring. And so the fact that we're able to create space and place to discuss that very thing is very much important. So the fact that if you could just continue to elevate the need and the trauma that anti-Black racism causes on our students, long-lasting trauma, right? And so we are committed to going back, and this group that's here with you today, and just looking at the things that have been elevated and what we need to do as part of our next steps. We heard the fact that we aren't communicating some of the things that we have done well enough for all to know. We heard the fact that students don't always know that there are multiple ways for reporting. We heard the things, and so we are taking on that charge of going back and figuring out what are the things that we must do to fix that, because there are some things in place, but they're only as effective as well as they're known, right?
Yeah.
And so it's great that the things are in place, but if we can't articulate them and communicate and advertise them so that all students are aware of them, they're not helping the way they're designed to. So we will absolutely take that back. So thank you for the time and the feedback and the input, the knowledge and the experiences and the stories. So that helps us to shift our practices. So again, thank you.
Any students on that issue, what you would like this anti-hate task force to do on behalf of students in partnership with MCPS and partnership with the community? Any thoughts on that? And I saw a few, certainly some folk do not want SROs back in schools. That might be one of them, but any other things that we can be doing as we close out our experience as a cohort and deliver.
And if you think of something later, you can always send me an email.
Oh, yeah.
I'll put my email in the chat so that you'll have that. If you need an advocate, ally, help, if you need to get to a person that's on this call tonight, please feel free to email me. And you may do so anonymously. I don't mind. Whatever it takes for you to feel safe, just let me know if I can help.
Yeah, Tiffany, I'm glad you said that. Students, if any of you at this very moment feel completely vulnerable or at risk or in danger or any way as a result of a crime, bias, or incident, please let the professionals on this line know. Email Tiffany or the school MCPS personnel that are on the line now. This is a concern. This is a real effort that is on your behalf. And we cannot be effective unless we know what's going on, what's happening to you. And I don't think any of us care about the sordid details, how awful it is, but we do not want anything bad to happen to you while you're trying to get an educational experience through MCPS. This is one of the worst things adults and parents live with. Not only the risk of, our own children bear, but the risk that our children's friends and other families bear when they're at the whims of hate and violence. So do take this opportunity either today or some other time, lodge your complaint if necessary with anyone on this line or some other resource or to the police. This should not be happening to you. This should not be a disruptive in your life at all. And lastly,
students,
yeah.
One last resource. Stephanie Wallace, if you feel unsafe tonight, if you need support, 988 is our crisis hotline number. If you need support before you can get to any of us, 988 is in the chat. So just remember that, log it into your phones also.
There you go. And Director Stowe, before we leave, did you want to make an announcement about an event coming up to the group? We still have quite a few people on here.
Thank you so much, Mr. Co-Chair. And I just sent to some of the folks who are still online with Montgomery County Public Schools. On the 24th of September is our 10th annual friendship picnic. It's an occasion that's family friendly, 12 noon until 5 p.m. Free event. And I've just sent you all flyers. Greg Edmiston is on our committee against hate violence, along with Ms. Perez as well. So we say to you that this is an opportunity to come out primarily to fight hate. This event came out of, you may recall, 10 years ago, the Boston Marathon was interrupted at the very end with a major explosion that ended up maiming and killing a number of people. And the upshot of it is that Boston, Massachusetts almost pulled itself apart because folks were blaming each other for the perpetrators being amongst those persons in the city of Boston. And had it not been for the baseball teams, it turns out, if you may recall, the whole term Boston Strong came out of them trying to say to themselves, let's just let the process work. And obviously the victims appreciated a much more kind of surrounding about them and for them by the overwhelming majority of us in this country, around the world. But the perpetrators were found. And we ask ourselves, if in Montgomery County, if a situation happened like that, would we be able to depend upon our relationships to move us through that process? And a number of folks I asked that question of could not give me an answer. They weren't sure. So this event is all about trying to make ourselves even more sure that we can work through a difficult issue like that, should it ever happen in Montgomery County, that we have enough staying power as one community to move beyond the situation that may occur like that. And God forbid it ever were to occur. But it's got to be intentional, and we got to start again doing things that bring us together for no other reason other than bring us together. This is not about anything else other than coming and enjoying a beautiful, hopefully Sunday afternoon, again, with activities for your children, as well as members of your family, live music, food, all kinds of things going on. And wouldn't it be great to have opportunities then to have students come as well and find ways to have small group discussions about some of these issues in their own authentic kind of way. So I put it out there for you. I hope that we can take advantage of this. Again, it's a free event at Wheaton Regional Park in Wheaton, very wonderful community. And so again, come out, we'll have all kinds of opportunities to get to and from the event, sponsored by Ride on Bus. And so all that is part of that information I just sent you, John, and also to Damon. And thank you all again for allowing me to share that. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chair, Madam Co-Chair, thank you for allowing me to share that as well to this group.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. And if there are no other remarks or questions, then we'll consider ourselves adjourned. And again, on behalf of Tiffany and myself, we thank you immensely for your participation and continued participation as we attempt to resolve these issues on behalf of our students in a most favorable way. Good night, everyone.